The rain wouldn't stop that night. It tapped on the chapel roof like 1,000 unanswered questions. Sister Margaret was locking the doors when she heard it. A sound too soft to be thunder, too human to ignore. A cry. She stepped outside. There, on the cold stone steps, was a baby, wrapped in a hospital blanket. No note, no name, just a small bracelet that read, "Baby girl, room 302." She held the child close, her arms trembling. She'd taken vows. Not for this. But some things go beyond rules. And so she raised her, named her Anna, fed her, prayed with her, held her through fevers and nightmares, watched her grow into a bright, brave 12-year-old who sang in the choir and called the chapel home. Until the day a black car arrived outside the gates. A woman in heels, a man in a suit, paperwork in hand. DNA results confirmed. They were her real parents, and they wanted her back. What happened in that courtroom shocked everyone. But what Anna said, it froze the room. This woman is my mother. I don't care what your tests say. I'm staying with her. What would you do if family meant more than blood? Watch to the very end. You won't believe how it all turns out. And let us know, where in the world are you watching from? Sister Margaret's mornings began in silence. Not out of ritual, but out of reverence. At 62, her steps had softened, her routines sharpened. The chapel was her heartbeat, and the small orphanage beside it, her pulse. She didn't need much. A prayer, a pot of tea, the sound of children waking slowly. She'd been a nun for over 30 years. Her hair was silver, her voice soft as quilted hymns. She kept her sleeves rolled up and her garden tools clean. She wrote letters by hand and read bedtime stories, with all the voices. People in the village called her the soul of the hill. But Margaret never saw titles. She only kept a small box of personal things, old photographs, a broken rosary, a poem copied from a book. The only thing new in that box was a sketch of a star-shaped birthmark. She never spoke of it. Each day she lit candles for people who never asked. Each night she prayed for children she would never meet. And she loved them anyway. The chapel had 6 pews, 3 stained glass windows, and a bell that rang twice on Sundays. It had no budget, no choir, no grant, but it had Margaret. She served with humility, never asking for reward. Until one night, a reward came wrapped in something else. It wasn't a blessing. Not at first. It was a burden, a cry, and it would change her life forever. It rained like grief that night. Hard, fast, and without pause. Margaret had stayed up later than usual, sewing buttons back onto a boy's coat. He'd lost them during play, and she couldn't let him face Monday with a gap in his warmth. That's when she heard it, a sound between animal and infant. Not nearby, not far. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped into the storm. The wind howled down the hill like it was chasing something. But Margaret kept walking, toward the sound, toward the unknown. She turned the chapel corner and froze. There, in a wicker basket on the stone steps, was a baby. Soaked, alone, wrapped in a thin blanket stamped with a hospital logo and the faint scent of antiseptic. The child was pale, her hands clenched tight, as if the world had already taught her to brace for it. No note, no bottle, no name, just a plastic wristband. Baby girl, room 302. Margaret knelt. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She whispered, "Oh, little one, who didn't stay for you," and gathered her into her arms like she'd been waiting her whole life to hold someone who wouldn't let go. She didn't call anyone that night. She dried the baby, warmed her, fed her milk from a bottle borrowed from the toddler room. At dawn, she filled out a form with the local authority. Infant found. No guardian present. They offered to take her. Margaret declined. She's safer here. For now. She named her Anna. Not for anyone in particular. Just for the way it felt to say it gently. Anna cried often in the early weeks. Not from pain, Margaret suspected, but from memory. Like she was born knowing loss. The village priest advised caution. "You're not young anymore, Margaret. I'm not raising a future. I'm holding a life." They couldn't argue with that. As the months passed, Anna grew. She laughed easily, loved music, and hated mashed peas. She clung to Margaret's robes like gravity. By the time she was walking, she called Margaret Mama, in the way toddlers mishear the world and say what feels truest. No one corrected her, especially not Margaret. Years moved the way seasons do, quietly until they're already behind you. By 7, Anna knew every corner of the chapel. She helped light the candles, passed out in books, chased butterflies in the garden after prayer. By 10, she was reading scripture out loud, voice small but steady. Other children came and went through the orphanage, but Anna remained, because Sister Margaret never stopped hoping that no one would come to take her away. She never said it out loud, but she prayed it every night. 12 years later, the cry returned, not from a baby, from a legal notice. It was a Tuesday morning when the car arrived, black, polished, silent. The kind of silence that didn't come from reverence, like in the chapel, but from money. It stopped just short of the church gate, like it was too clean to touch the gravel. Sister Margaret watched from the side steps of the chapel, her watering can paused midair. 2 people stepped out, a man in a steel gray suit and a woman with heels too high for country ground. Both in their 30s. Their posture said decision. Their eyes said claim. Margaret had seen that look before. In courtrooms, in adoption papers, in heartbreaks, but never pointed at Anna. They didn't speak at first, just looked at the chapel, the garden, and then toward the window, where Anna was drawing, unaware, safe in the sun. The woman's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. The man held a folder tight. Finally, they walked up. You must be Sister Margaret. I am. My name is Daniel Hart. This is my wife, Evelyn. Margaret nodded slowly. I believe you've met Anna, Evelyn said, voice soft but distant. Margaret didn't move. She's our daughter, Daniel added. The world didn't shift. It snapped. Margaret didn't flinch. But inside, her heart fell through the floor. I found her 12 years ago, she said. She wasn't lost, Evelyn answered. She was taken. The accusation hung in the air like incense that didn't belong. Daniel opened the folder. Hospital documents. DNA. Witness statements. She was removed from the maternity ward. Police report filed the next morning. Margaret took the papers. Her hands shook, but she read every line. The name on the birth record matched the name on the wristband from that night. Room 302, female infant Hart. Evelyn stepped forward. We've been looking for her for years. She was left at our doorstep. We didn't leave her. Margaret looked at Anna through the window. 12 years old now. The soft jawline. The birthmark on her shoulder. The voice that called her mom in the quietest parts of the day. I don't doubt your loss, she said, but I know what I held. We want her back. The words dropped like a gavel. Anna sat across the dinner table that night, confused by the quiet. Margaret had never hidden things from her. But some truths weren't small enough to be told at once. There's a couple, she said. They say they're your biological parents. Anna blinked. What does that mean? It means you were born to them, but raised here. Are they nice? I don't know yet. Anna played with her food, then asked the question Margaret feared most. Do I have to go? Margaret didn't answer. She just reached out and held her hand. 2 weeks later, the legal papers arrived. A petition for full custody. A request for return. A challenge to everything sacred Margaret had ever built. They had proof. The court believed them. The state called it a complex case of delayed identification. The lawyers called it a formality. Margaret called it a storm. She hired someone, not for tactics, but for translation. The lawyer was kind, young, out of her depth, but willing to try. They have everything, she said. The DNA test is absolute. DNA doesn't hold memories, Margaret replied. No, ma'am, but it holds rights. The trial began in midsummer. The courtroom was wood-paneled and cold. Anna sat beside Margaret, feet not yet touching the ground. The Hart sat across, hands folded, eyes dry. The judge was a man with a gray beard and glasses too thin to hide behind. Each side presented facts. The birth, the disappearance, the report, the discovery. 12 years apart. Margaret wasn't accused of malice, but she was accused of obstruction. Why didn't you seek to adopt her legally? The prosecutor asked. I thought she'd been abandoned. Did you report her condition? Yes, but no one followed up, and I couldn't let her go into the system. You made that decision alone. No, I made it with love. The courtroom didn't clap. It never does. The hearts testified. They spoke of grief, of searching, of therapy, of loss. People wept in the gallery. Then it was Anna's turn. The judge asked gently, Do you understand why you're here? Anna nodded. You've met Mr. and Mrs. Hart? Yes, they're your biological parents. Anna blinked. But Sister Margaret is my real one. The judge leaned forward. What do you mean? Anna stood up, 12 years old, in sneakers and a second-hand dress. Hand shaking, voice clear. She was the one who stayed. She fed me, held me, taught me how to braid hair. She sat with me through my nightmares. She let me cry. She let me be. Then she turned to the Harts. I'm sorry you lost me, but I'm not lost now. And I'm not yours just because I came from you. She turned back to the judge. This woman is my mother. I will not leave her. The courtroom went still. Even the attorneys forgot to speak. The judge took a recess. 30 minutes passed in silence. When he returned, he cleared his throat and read from the bench. There are cases where the law dictates, and cases where the law must listen. He granted joint legal custody, but placed Anna in permanent physical residence with Sister Margaret, because home, he said, is where the child chooses to stay. They returned to the chapel that evening, not with triumph, but with tired joy. Sister Margaret held Anna's hand as they passed through the gates, both of them quieter than usual. The gravel under their shoes felt softer somehow, like it remembered who belonged there. No one clapped. No one waited. It was the kind of homecoming that doesn't need noise, just presence. Anna dropped her school bag by the bench outside the chapel door and looked up at Margaret. Can we go light a candle? Margaret nodded. Her voice was caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. They stepped into the sanctuary. The same wood, the same scent of wax and quiet. Anna struck a match, lit one flame, then whispered, for the ones who didn't get to stay. Margaret blinked fast. The matchbox in her hand trembled just slightly. That night, they made soup. Not to eat, just to fill the space with something warm. Margaret sat at the kitchen table while Anna chopped carrots. It had become their tradition. Anna cooks. Margaret pretends not to supervise. Are you okay? Anna asked. Margaret folded a napkin, smoothed it once, then again. I was prepared to lose, she said. But I wasn't, Anna replied. So I didn't let you. Margaret looked at her, really looked. 12 years of faith and fear sitting across from her in a flowered apron. You shouldn't have had to be brave. But I wanted to. In the days that followed, things returned to rhythm, but not sameness. Neighbors left baked goods by the steps. One woman crocheted a banner that read, Love built this house. The postman shook Margaret's hand and said nothing, just nodded like he delivered something bigger than letters. The Harts sent a letter, not to reclaim, just to explain. They said they didn't expect forgiveness, but they hoped Anna knew they were relieved. She had been loved so well. Margaret read it twice. Anna didn't read it at all. School resumed. Anna walked in without fear. Some classmates stared, but fewer than expected. One girl placed a folded piece of paper in her locker. Inside was a drawing, 2 stick figures, holding hands. One wore a habit. Anna kept it in her math book. At recess, a teacher approached her. I saw what you said in court, she murmured. You reminded all of us who we're really here for. Anna just smiled. I just told the truth. That Sunday, the chapel was full. Not with believers, but with people who'd remembered they were allowed to care. Margaret didn't mention the trial. She read from Ruth. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. She didn't need to explain the scripture. Everyone already understood. Weeks passed, and the ache in Margaret's chest didn't disappear. Not pain. Something else. A softness. The ache you get when you almost lose something you never thought you were allowed to keep. She began painting again. Badly, wonderfully. Anna helped. They made ugly flowers and smiling suns, and a giant heart that took up half the kitchen wall. It didn't match the stained glass, but it matched the feeling. One night, Anna asked, "Do you ever wish you had your own children?" Margaret didn't answer right away. She looked at the chipped mug in her hand, then at the girl in front of her. "I have one." Later that month, a woman from the diocese came to visit. She brought questions and a clipboard. "Are you still fit to run this place alone?" Margaret smiled. "I've never been alone." She turned to Anna. The girl stood tall, steady, without fear. "I think she's proof of that." The woman nodded once and closed her folder. In time, Margaret grew slower. Not weak, just paced. Like a woman who no longer rushed through what mattered. Anna began leading the children's services, teaching hymns, writing little devotionals. One afternoon, she found Margaret napping in the garden. Sunlight touched her shoulders like grace. Anna sat beside her and whispered, "I'll keep this place open, even when you can't." Margaret didn't stir, but a small smile tugged at her lips. By winter, the village began to call it Anna's chapel. Margaret didn't correct them, because names don't matter, but love does. Anna had always been small for her age, not in spirit, but in stature. What she lacked in height, she made up for in presence. People didn't just see her, they listened when she spoke. She had Margaret's calm, but not her quiet. She didn't whisper her truth. She carried it in her chest like a bell. At school, her classmates now sat up straighter when she raised her hand. Teachers let her read aloud, not because she was the best reader, but because her voice made the words sound like they mattered. When a younger student tripped in the courtyard, it was Anna who knelt first. She brushed off the boy's knees, tied his untied shoe, and offered a smile that seemed to tell him, "You're safe here." That's what people felt around her. Safe. At home, she started waking earlier than Margaret. She'd light the first candle in the chapel. She'd fill the kettle for tea. Some mornings, she'd sit in the pew alone for a few minutes before the world started turning. She said it helped her listen for things people forgot to hear. Not voices, not angels, just stillness, the kind that holds you instead of answering. Margaret once found her there and asked, "What do you pray for, love?" Anna had smiled, eyes still closed, and answered, "For the people who don't think they're allowed to be loved." The Harts visited again months later, not with lawyers, not with demands, just with permission. They asked if Anna would like to meet her younger half-brother. Anna hesitated, then said yes. They met at a local cafe. The boy was 6. Shy, kind-eyed. He had the same nose as Anna. They talked about animals, favorite colors, silly school stories. Nothing deep, just life. Afterward, Evelyn asked gently if Anna would ever like to visit their home. Anna said, "Maybe one day. But I don't live in your story. I'm already living in mine." Evelyn nodded. There were tears, but not the kind that needed fixing. They parted with soft goodbyes. Margaret never asked for details. She only asked if Anna felt okay. Anna said, "I feel chosen, and I choose here." The chapel began to change, subtly, quietly, beautifully. Kids who used to avoid it started wandering in. Some came to draw. Others just sat in the stillness. One left a note, "I don't believe in God, but I believe in whatever this feeling is." Anna found that note and tucked it into the hymn book she used most often. She told Margaret, "I think people want a place where it's okay to feel everything." Margaret said, "Then that's what this place is." And it became true. One cold evening, as frost whispered on the windows, Anna found an envelope slipped beneath the chapel door. No name, just handwriting that looked rushed. Inside was a photo, old, faded, a woman crying, holding a baby in a hospital hallway. On the back, "I was 19. I was scared. I thought I couldn't be enough. You became more than I ever was brave enough to try to be. Thank you for raising her." Anna held the photo for a long time. She didn't tell Margaret right away. She just lit a candle and whispered, "She knows." Spring came gently that year. The garden bloomed earlier than expected. Anna planted tulips, one for every child who had come through the orphanage. She gave them names, not real ones. Feelings, joy, wonder, quiet, strength. forgiveness. She watered them every morning before school. Margaret said, "It's a lot of work." Anna said, "It's a lot of remembering." A reporter called one afternoon, asked if Anna would like to speak for a feature on children raised by non-biological families. Anna said no. "I don't need to be a symbol." "Why not?" "Because I'm already someone's story." Then she hung up. She went outside, picked one of the tulips, and pressed it into Margaret's hair behind her ear. Margaret laughed. "I'm too old for flowers in my hair." Anna said, "No one's too old to be chosen." By midsummer, Anna started journaling more. Not online, not for show, just small notes on paper. She wrote about the boy with scraped knees, about the teacher who started calling her light bearer, about the morning Margaret let her sleep in and cooked pancakes that looked like clouds. She called the notebook "Things That Made Me Stay." And every night, she added one more. One day, she asked Margaret, "Do you think people can have more than one beginning?" Margaret looked up from her book. "I think every ending is a doorway. Then I think I'm on my third beginning." Third. First was when I was born. Second was when you found me. Third is now, when I realize I get to choose what comes next. Margaret said nothing. She just reached over, held her hand, and whispered, "Then make it something worth staying for." The first thing she wrote in the new notebook was simple. The door was never locked. That memory stuck with her. How Sister Margaret never used a key on the chapel door. She said if someone needed to come in, they should never be kept out by a lock. Anna didn't understand the weight of that when she was younger. Now she did. It wasn't about safety. It was about belonging. The second thing she wrote, "She never made me earn her love." It came without performance, without conditions, without needing to be polite all the time, or smile when she was hurting, or explain her feelings in perfect words. Margaret had made space for all of it. The mess, the grief, the confusion. She loved her as is. That was rare in the world. Anna knew that now. The third. She asked what I thought, even when I was 5. Margaret didn't speak to her like a child. She spoke with her like someone who mattered. When they planted flowers, she asked where Anna wanted them. When they rearranged the books, she let Anna decide by color. When there was a decision to be made, big or small, Margaret always asked, "What do you think?" It didn't matter what Anna said. It mattered that she said something, that her voice had weight in the world. She kept the notebook hidden at first, not because it was secret, but because it was sacred. She didn't want anyone reading the pieces before she finished putting herself together with them. The fourth entry came late one night. She made me tea without asking if I wanted any. It was a Tuesday. Anna had come home from school quiet. Something had happened to Test, a friend, a look she didn't like. She didn't talk about it. She just went upstairs and sat on her bed. 5 minutes later, Margaret knocked gently, didn't wait, and walked in with tea. Didn't ask, didn't push, just placed it down and sat. They drank in silence. That's when Anna learned that company without demand is the purest kind of comfort. She added pages slowly after that. A kindness, a memory, a phrase. "Take the blanket. I'll use the old one. I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to help you learn how. You don't have to be brave right now. I'll hold the brave for both of us." They weren't grand gestures, but they made her stay. In the back of the notebook, she began writing letters she never sent. One was to Evelyn. "Thank you for not trying to undo what I became." One was to the boy who used to bully her. "I don't hate you. I just hope you learn softer ways to ask for attention." One was to the baby she used to be. "You weren't abandoned. You were placed in the hands that knew how to hold you." She read that one out loud to Margaret once. It was the only one she ever shared. Margaret cried, but not from sadness, from recognition. When the newspaper called again for a follow-up story, Anna still said no. But she wrote a version in her notebook anyway. "I wasn't rescued. I was received. There's a difference. Rescue implies crisis. Receiving means you were made welcome." That one stayed in her pocket for a week. She folded and unfolded it like a stone she needed to hold. She gave her first public talk at the chapel's youth night. It wasn't advertised, just word of mouth. About 20 people showed up. Anna stood at the pulpit, nervous, fidgety, sleeves too long, and said, "I used to think being chosen was the point, but I think choosing to stay is where the real power is." She spoke for 8 minutes. People didn't clap. They didn't need to. They just stayed. Talked quietly after. One girl wrote a note and left it behind. "I didn't think I was allowed to want to belong. Thank you." Anna kept that too. One afternoon, Margaret fell asleep in the reading chair. Anna sat nearby and stared at her for a long time. All the lines on her face, the wear on her hands, the kind of beauty no one writes about, quiet, aging earned. She opened the notebook again. She became my home by showing me where to place my grief. In the last pages, she started listing the things she hoped Margaret remembered. That her laugh was her real signature. That she prayed better in the garden than the pulpit. That she never needed to finish strong, because she'd already been strong from the start. That her love made room, not rules. And on the final page, she told me once, "We don't get to choose how we arrive in the world, but we do get to choose who we become in it." I chose to become someone who stays. It had been over a year since the court case, when they visited again. This time, there was no letter, no lawyers, just footsteps and a soft knock on the chapel's back door. Margaret opened it slowly, already sensing who it might be before the hinges finished groaning. Daniel and Evelyn Hart stood there, but not the same way as before. There was no suit, no briefcase, just Daniel in a sweater and Evelyn in jeans, holding a tin of shortbread in both hands like an offering. Margaret blinked once, then stepped aside. "You're welcome," she said, before they could ask. They didn't sit in the formal room. They sat in the kitchen, like neighbors. Evelyn looked around the space. The mismatched chairs, the tea towels frayed at the edges, the old photo of Anna's first drawing, still taped to the cabinet. "It's strange," Evelyn said, "to feel like a guest in your own child's story." "She's not a story," Margaret replied softly. "She's a whole library." Daniel laughed, surprised by his own honesty. "She told us you say things like that." "She says better things now," Margaret said. "She's become someone I learn from." Anna came in a few minutes later, not expecting guests. She paused in the doorway. Evelyn stood. Anna didn't run, didn't retreat. She just nodded and said, "Hi." They didn't hug, but they didn't need to. Evelyn offered the tin. "Shortbread. I remember you liked it." "Thanks," Anna said, taking it. "I still do." They talked, lightly, awkwardly, gently. Daniel said, "We didn't come to make anything hard." Anna looked at them carefully. "I'm not made of glass," she said. "Just choice." Evelyn blinked quickly, as if holding something back. Daniel added, "We wanted to ask, not press, if you might ever want to meet your grandparents. Or cousins. On either side." Anna sat with that, then said, "I might." Then added, "But not as your daughter. Just as me." They both nodded. It was more than they expected. It was enough. After they left, Margaret made tea. Anna sat by the stove, staring out the window. "You okay?" Margaret asked. "I think so. You were very kind." "I wasn't trying to be kind," Anna said. "I was just trying not to disappear." Margaret placed a hand on her back. "You didn't. You grew bigger than their absence." Later that week, Anna wrote in her notebook again, "I don't have to be someone's to be someone." That night, she read that line aloud to Margaret, who was preparing candles for Sunday. Margaret turned, her hand still. "That's one of the truest things I've ever heard." Anna closed the book and smiled. "You taught me the parts of myself that no one ever tried to claim." 2 months passed. Then came a letter, not from Daniel or Evelyn, but from Evelyn's mother. It was short, just a note of gratitude. "I didn't raise her well enough to keep you, but I raised her well enough to come back with respect." Anna didn't reply. She folded the letter and placed it between the pages of her notebook. A new page followed. "Grace is the decision to make space for people you're no longer waiting on." In town, people still asked questions, but fewer now. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally trusted the answer. Anna had become a fixture, not just of the chapel, but of the village itself. She helped the grocer unload boxes. She held babies in the back pew during long services. She taught younger kids how to sketch during youth group nights. When asked where she learned it all, she always said the same thing. From someone who never gave up teaching me, even when the world tried to rewrite our ending. On the anniversary of her arrival, Anna and Margaret did something they hadn't done before. They returned to the hospital. Room 302 didn't exist anymore, but they stood outside where it once was. Anna touched the wall gently, then took out a folded paper heart. On it, "I made it home." She slipped it into the hospital's chapel donation box. Margaret watched, eyes full. Anna turned to her and said, "Let's go home." And they did. There's a kind of weight you carry when you know someone picked you. Not out of duty, not by accident, but because they saw you and still stayed. Anna carried that weight with a kind of grace she didn't always realize she had. She didn't talk about it often, but you could see it in how she listened when someone else was hurting, how she stepped forward before anyone asked, how she never sat in the center of the circle, but always made sure no one was left outside of it. At the chapel, a new boy arrived in the spring, 7 years old, small hands, didn't speak much. He flinched at sudden sounds and always kept his shoes on, even in bed. Anna didn't ask questions. She just started sitting nearby. She offered crayons, not conversation. Gave him a small flashlight, not advice. Margaret watched them from the kitchen window one evening. "You're good with him," she said later. Anna shrugged. "I remember what it felt like to be scared and not know if it was allowed." The boy eventually spoke, once softly, during breakfast. He said Anna's name. She smiled like it was a hymn. School changed too. More kids started coming to chapel programs. Not because they believed in everything, but because they believed in her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't a leader by title, but she was a leader by presence. The kind of person who makes people want to be better just by sitting beside them. One teacher started keeping a jar in her classroom called the Small Brave Things. Students could write anonymous slips. I returned a lost wallet. I apologized first. I told someone I was scared. Anna added one day. I stayed. The teacher framed that one. No name, but everyone knew. Margaret once asked her what that meant. I stayed. Anna said, when everything told me to disappear, to shrink, to let someone else decide. I didn't. I stayed in the room, in the decision, in the truth. That's brave, right? Margaret's eyes glistened. Yes, love. That's the bravest. One Sunday, during service, Margaret's voice cracked while reading. She paused, cleared her throat. Anna didn't wait. She rose, walked up, placed her hand gently on the lectern, and picked up the scripture. She read the rest. Not flawlessly, not theatrically, just honestly. The way people need things to be when life gets heavy. After the service, someone approached her. You should think about becoming a minister. Anna smiled. I already am. Just not with a title. That summer, Margaret became ill. Nothing sudden. Just slower steps. Deeper rests. Longer silences between words. Anna noticed. Margaret didn't hide it. One evening, they sat on the back steps, watching the garden. Are you afraid? Anna asked. Of leaving. Margaret said. No. Of not seeing what comes next. Margaret turned. But I already do. I see you. Anna cried that night. Not out of grief, but out of gratitude that sometimes arrives wearing sorrow's clothes. She began preparing things without being asked. Filing papers, labeling drawers, writing instructions for things she already knew how to do. When Margaret noticed, she just said, You're not replacing me. You're carrying me forward. Anna started writing again. This time, not just in the notebook, but letters. To kids who'd lived in the orphanage and moved on. To the town librarian who once told her she had a poet's mouth. To the doctor who stitched her knee at 8 and called her tougher than most adults. She wrote, You were part of the map that led me here. I just wanted to say thank you. She also wrote one to herself, folded it, left it in the drawer of her bedside table. It read, You stayed. And that changed everything. People began to visit more. Neighbors brought soup. Former foster kids came to rake leaves. A girl who once ran away from the chapel came back just to hug Margaret's shoulders. It wasn't charity. It was return. And through it all, Anna stayed. Every meal, every evening prayer, every quiet moment when words couldn't reach, but hands could. She once told Margaret, "You saved me by not asking me to be anyone else." Margaret whispered back, "And you saved me by staying long enough to become yourself." The first time Anna stood in the pulpit alone, the chapel was quiet, not out of duty, but out of something deeper, a kind of listening people do when they know the person speaking didn't fight for attention, but earned the space through presence. The light through the stained glass fell softly across her face. She didn't read a sermon. She read a story. About a garden. About a door that was never locked. About a woman who once picked her up off the steps and never let her go. No one moved. Even the candles flickered slower, as if listening too. She didn't say Margaret's name. She didn't need to. Every person there knew who planted the roots Anna now stood on. They saw it in the steadiness of her voice, in the way her hand stayed open when she spoke, in the kindness that never tried to impress, only to understand. Afterward, someone left a note at the altar. "You don't preach like a nun. You preach like a daughter." Anna kept that one, taped it inside her journal next to the words. "What I carry forward is not a legacy. It's a promise." Margaret's health held steady through autumn. She didn't walk as far, didn't cook as often, but she still hummed when Anna braided her hair in the mornings. They kept a routine. Tea at 7, prayers at 9, silence at noon, and sometimes storytelling at dusk. Anna once asked, "What do you think happens after?" Margaret said, "I think the people who loved us most keep whispering through us." Anna whispered back, "Then I hope I never run out of things to say." One weekend, Anna organized a letter-writing day at the chapel. People of all ages came. Some wrote to their past selves. Some wrote to the people they missed. Some wrote to strangers and left the letters in the garden. The event caught on. It became a tradition. They called it Letters That Stay. The local paper did a small story on it, called Anna a quiet force of belonging. She laughed when she read it. Margaret said, "They finally gave you a title." "I already had one," Anna said. "Daughter." The garden behind the chapel grew full again, not just with flowers, but with hands. People came to help, to prune, to plant. There was no head gardener. Anna just handed out gloves and said, "Dig where you feel drawn." She believed in giving people permission to become useful again. One day, a woman from the city came. She said she'd once passed the chapel years ago when she was homeless. "I didn't go in," she said, "but I remember the light." Now, she brought her own daughter to see the garden. Anna gave them each a tulip bulb. "Plant it where you'll return," she said. The woman cried. The daughter smiled. They came back a month later with photos of it blooming. Margaret began writing again, too. Small notes, little prayers, quotes she used to recite, but now wanted to leave behind. Anna helped collect them. Together, they called it The Door Was Never Locked, a book of small graces. They printed 20 copies. They gave them away for free. On the anniversary of Anna's court hearing, she didn't celebrate. She lit a candle, sat in silence, then wrote, "I'm not what was fought over. I'm what was fought for." That line lived on the chapel wall now, hand-painted by a teen who once refused to come inside. Anna didn't force her, just invited her to paint. Now that girl came every Thursday. When Margaret's health finally declined, Anna didn't leave her side. She read to her, held her hand through the night, reminded her of the weather, of the garden, of the children's laughter. The night before she passed, Margaret whispered, "What will you do now?" And Anna said, "I'll keep the door open." Margaret smiled and slept. They buried her behind the chapel, under the tree she once planted, beside the bench where she braided hair and poured tea. No headstone, just a wooden sign that read, "She didn't need to be remembered. She just needed to be followed." Anna didn't speak much at the service, just lit a candle and said one line, "I was never just raised. I was rooted." Then sat down and let the silence hold everyone the way Margaret once held her. The chapel door creaked, that morning like it always did. But this time, it was Anna who turned the key. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just walking into Sister Margaret's chapel. She was opening her own. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her hand still on the knob, breathing in what the space had become. The scent of wax and old books, the echo of wooden pews, the softness of morning light through colored glass. It didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. Anna stepped in. The silence welcomed her. She didn't rush. She didn't cry. She walked the length of the aisle with her fingertips brushing each pew, as if saying hello to a friend who never left. The altar looked smaller now, not because she'd grown, but because she saw it differently. It wasn't just a platform. It was a memory of stories, of prayers, of Margaret's voice calling her name like a psalm. She didn't change much that first week. She cleaned the candlesticks. She refolded the linens. She straightened the books by feel, not title. But she did one thing differently. She placed a notebook on the first pew with a pen. A sign beside it read, "Write what you need to leave behind, or what you hope to carry." By Sunday, there were 10 entries. By the next Sunday, 23. Some were long. Some just a word. Fear. Thank you. Come back. I'm trying. Anna read them all. Not to fix, but to witness. She began giving talks once a month. Not sermons. Not lectures. Just shared stories. Sometimes hers. Sometimes others. She always ended the same way. The door was never locked. And if you're here, it means you were always allowed. One afternoon, a girl from town came crying. Not from pain. From shame. She sat in the second row and said nothing. Anna sat beside her. Didn't touch her. Didn't speak. Just placed a box of tissues beside her and waited. After 20 minutes, the girl whispered, "They said I'm not good enough for forgiveness." Anna replied, "Goodness isn't a requirement for grace. Only presence." The girl stayed for hours. She came back the next week with cookies. More people came. Not all believers. Not all from the village. They heard about the girl with quiet words and open doors. They came for her stillness. They stayed for her steadiness. A man who hadn't been to church in 30 years started fixing the broken chairs. A teen who once mocked her now ran the sound system. Even the mayor visited once and left a folded note that read, "I never knew peace could be this small and still feel this whole." The village began to call it Anna's place. But the sign still read, "St. Mary's Chapel, all are welcome." Anna never changed it, because she hadn't built it. She'd simply become it. One day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was an old photograph of Margaret, younger, standing in the very same chapel doorway, holding a baby. On the back, she knew before we did. Anna placed the photo on the chapel's back wall. Underneath, she wrote, "This is where I was found. This is where I stayed. This is where I begin again." She started writing letters again, not just to others, but to herself. One read, "Dear little me, you were never too much. You were never a mistake. You were the beginning of something sacred." She folded it into her journal with the rest. On the anniversary of Margaret's passing, Anna lit 12 candles, one for each year they shared, then added a 13th. For everything she gave me I didn't know I'd still need. She didn't speak. She didn't post. She just stood there while the wax softened and the chapel stayed still. That night, she closed the chapel door gently, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "It's mine now," but it was always ours. It was the little things that stayed. The way the chapel smelled after rain, the creak in the fourth step, the chipped edge of the window where the light always bent just right at 9:13 a.m. Anna noticed them all, not as flaws, but as fingerprints. She didn't want to restore the chapel to perfection. She wanted to preserve the places it had been touched by people, worn into memory. The notebook on the front pew was full now. She placed a second one beside it. New cover. Same message. Write what you need to leave behind, or what you hope to carry. People kept writing. Someone copied a page and turned it into a song. Another left a poem titled "The Door Never Locked for Me Again." A third just wrote, "I sat here and didn't disappear." That one stayed with Anna for days. She began closing each service with a candle. Not one she lit, but one she gave away. Take it, she'd say. Let it remind you you're never fully in the dark. Some people cried when she said it. Others nodded like they'd always known. She started visiting the hospital where she was born. Not often, but quietly. She didn't ask for records, didn't search for old files. She just sat in the waiting room sometimes and smiled at new mothers. No one knew who she was, but that was okay. Once, a nurse recognized her. "You're the chapel girl." Anna nodded. "You were left here, weren't you?" "No," she said softly. "I was found here." That fall, a child was brought to the chapel. 5 years old. Foster placement. Nervous. Anna made space. Gave no questions. Just crayons. The child drew a picture of a sun and said, "This is where it doesn't rain." Anna taped it to the chapel wall. It stayed there for months. On what would have been Margaret's 75th birthday, Anna held a gathering. No speeches. No eulogies. Just tea, muffins, and a chair left open near the altar. People took turns sitting in it. Some shared stories. Some just sat and let the light fall across their faces. At the end, Anna read from her notebook. "She didn't just raise me. She taught me how to hold people I may never meet." Then she closed it. The chapel stayed open later that night. Someone forgot to turn off the porch light. Anna left it. She said, "If someone needs it, they'll know where to come." She began writing a book. Not about herself, but about everything that helped her stay. She called it Candles, Doors, and Quiet Things. She wrote it in the mornings, before the world asked anything of her. She didn't get a publisher. She didn't need one. She printed 20 copies and gave them away. One ended up in the mayor's office. Another in the hands of a woman who used to live under a bridge. Another went to a school library. Kids wrote in the margins. This made me feel like I could be soft again. I wish my mom read this. Anna kept none for herself. She remembered every word anyway. Years passed. Seasons moved gently, the way they do when they're not fighting time. Anna stayed. The village changed. New shops, new people, but the chapel remained. Light, quiet, held together by names people never stopped whispering. Margaret, Anna, Hope. One night, a storm came through. Strong wind, broken branch. Anna went outside with a broom. She cleared the path, retied the gate, checked every window. When she came back in, soaked to the skin, she saw someone sitting in the back row. A boy. Lost eyes. Torn jacket. She said nothing, just sat near him. Waited. Eventually, he whispered, "They said I could come here if I needed a place." "You can," Anna replied. The boy looked at the candle in her hand. "Is that for me?" "Yes," she said, and the light was left on.